Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're completely demystifying the science of fitness transformations. So I want you to step back for a second and think about your body not as some abstract biological machine, but literally as a house that you're building from the ground up. Whether you're looking to get stronger, leaner, or honestly just healthier, we're going to dig into the exact physiological and psychological blueprints required to make that happen.
Here's our blueprint for today's explainer. First, consistency versus intensity. Then, mastering body recomposition, diving into the actual science of muscle, designing your program, and finally, we'll wrap up with a psychological payoff.
Section 1. Consistency beats intensity. Laying the foundation.
Okay, so just like building a house, right? One frantic, highly caffeinated day of intense labor isn't going to finish the job. Yet, we've all heard that classic old-school gym bro mantra, no pain, no gain. It's stamped on t-shirts, it's shouted by trainers, but honestly, it is a deeply flawed myth, and it's one that leads to countless injuries, severe burnout, and people just completely abandoning their goals entirely.
Here's exactly why we need to rethink that mindset. Intense workouts rely on fleeting motivation. Consistency relies on habit. Look, when you push your body to the absolute limit every single time you train, you're forcing it straight into survival mode. It's exhausting. Consistency, on the other hand, through moderate, repeated actions, gives your body the crucial time it needs to actually recover and adapt. It turns fitness from this monumental daily chore into an automatic, sustainable rhythm.
Section 2. Mastering body recomposition, framing the house. Once that solid foundation of consistency is laid, it's time to frame the house. Now, standard diets usually have one blind goal, which is just dropping numbers on a scale. But here's the thing. The scale does not care if you're losing fat or losing precious muscle. Body recomposition totally throws out those flawed BMI charts. It's a lifestyle approach focused purely on optimizing your fat-to-muscle ratio, meaning you're building a stronger, more resilient structure while you're leaning out.
So, the million-dollar question, how do we actually do this? Well, you need three main pillars. First, a moderate calorie deficit. And notice the word moderate. Starving yourself just eats away at your muscle. Second, a high protein intake. You got to supply the building blocks, things like lean poultry, eggs, lentils, so your body can preserve its lean mass. And third, you absolutely must incorporate strength training at least 2 days a week. You basically have to give your muscles a physical reason to stick around while the fat drops off.
Section 3. The science of muscle, the structural mechanics.
All right, if we really want to understand how lifting triggers growth, we need to put on our lab coats for a minute and look at two primary stressors. The first is mechanical stress. This is the sheer physical tension created when you're moving heavy loads. Think 1 to 6 reps with really long rests, like 3 to 5 minutes. This heavy stress forces microdamage in the tissue. In response, your body initiates a repair process, fusing stem cells, known as satellite cells, to the damaged tissue, literally building it back thicker and way more durable.
Now, the second type is metabolic stress. This is fatigue induced by moderate loads, say 8 to 12 repetitions, but with very short rest periods of maybe 30 to 90 seconds. Because your muscles are constantly working without fully recovering, you create a hypoxic or low oxygen environment. This leads to a massive accumulation of metabolites like lactate. It's exactly what creates that intense burning sensation in your muscles. And that specific burn triggers its own unique cascade of muscle-building responses, including a rush of intracellular hydration and a potential spike in major anabolic hormones like growth hormone, testosterone, and IGF-1.
When you map this out, it brilliantly illustrates how both of these stressors actually work in perfect tandem. Notice how the pathways converge. Whether you emphasize heavy mechanical tension or high fatigue metabolic stress, both serve as major contributing factors. They drive muscle activation, hydration, and hormonal spikes, all funneling directly into your ultimate goals. Increased hypertrophy, which is just a fancy science word for muscle size, and increased overall strength. But here is where your personal experience level completely changes the game. If you're an untrained lifter just starting out, the sheer novelty of the exercise is enough to drive growth. Almost any combination of lifting will work for a while. You get those newbie gains. But for trained lifters, the veterans who've been at it for years, their bodies are highly adapted. They hit a ceiling where non-specific training just won't cut it anymore. They have to purposefully and intelligently manipulate these specific mechanical and metabolic stresses to literally force their bodies to keep adapting. Section 4. Designing your training program. Executing the blueprint. Let's apply this lab data straight to the gym floor. When looking at the data on experienced lifters, it's super interesting to notice that participants utilizing high-intensity mechanical stress, so working that heavy 3 to 5 rep range with long rests, actually produce significantly greater improvements in lean mass compared to the high-volume group. So if you've been lifting for years and you feel totally stuck, dropping the reps and upping the heavy tension might be the exact stimulus you've been looking for.
But to apply any of this safely, you have to be smart about progression. You should really only increase your lifting loads by a maximum of 10% per week. Any faster, and you're just inviting injury. You also absolutely need to incorporate planned active recovery, yoga, walking, stretching. Finally, track your workouts. Every single time you log an extra rep or a slightly heavier weight, you build what sports psychologists call a timeline of proof. On those days when your motivation is absolutely zero, that timeline is your undeniable proof of consistency.
Section 5. The psychological payoff. The finishing touches.
Let's look at the finishing touches of our house. We've talked a lot about cells and sets, but honestly, the most profound transformation happens right in your mind. Elite athletes spend their entire lives developing mental toughness to block out pain. But everyday gymgoers reap these exact same cognitive rewards. Showing up consistently improves your emotional control under pressure, it increases your tolerance for daily monotony, and it actively rewires your brain chemistry for the better.
And the best part? The barrier to entry for these mental benefits is so much lower than you might think. Research clearly shows that you do not need to live in the gym. Just 3 days a week, 30 minutes a session, 10 weeks. Maintaining that totally scientifically proven, moderate threshold is enough to produce profound long-term reductions in stress and depressive symptoms. That right there is the ultimate return on your investment.
So, step back from the extreme diets. Step back from the exhausting random workouts. Look at the foundation you're laying today and ask yourself, are you just training to survive a single, fleeting, intense moment, or are you building a consistent fitness blueprint designed to last you a lifetime?